Sir Cliff Richard has launched a parliamentary petition calling for those suspected of sexual offences to be given anonymity until they're charged. The radio DJ Paul Gambaccini is supporting the campaign. He was accused of sexually assaulting two teenage boys, claims which were later dropped. Well, with us is the Labour MP Harriet Harman, who is also a former Solicitor General and Chair of Joint Committee on Human Rights. We'll also be speaking to Joe Morris, a barrister at Charter Chambers who specialises in cases of sexual assault. Welcome to you both, but Harriet Harman, I want to start with you, if I may. Would you support a change to the law for sexual offence suspects to be granted anonymity until the point at which they're charged?
No, I wouldn't support a change in the law, but I would support the police guidance being properly enforced, because the guidance that's supposed to apply to the police says that nobody should be named when they're suspected or even when they're arrested. They shouldn't be named until they're charged unless there are overriding circumstances, which means that it's necessary for the name to be published. And in that case, a chief officer has got to agree to that being the case, and the Crown Prosecution Service has got to be consulted. So what I don't think we should have is a change in the law which might inadvertently make it more difficult to prosecute serial sex offenders, when in fact what we need is the police guidance to be properly enforced. And it's also quite invidious to pick out one group of suspects and say we're going to have special rules in relation to them because somehow we suspect that the people accusing them are more likely to be lying than people who make accusations in other respects.
I think the argument there, though, is that these particular offences have a unique stain and stigma, don't they? And a man perhaps cannot recover from an allegation of rape perhaps quite as easily as he could recover from an allegation of burglary.
Well, let me just read from the guidance. The reason why there are these rules about not giving to the media information about someone's name, as did actually happen in relation to the case of Paul Gambaccini and Cliff Richard, it says that's why you shouldn't be giving the name out. The police should not give the name out. This approach recognises that in cases where the police name those who are arrested, there's a risk of unfair damage to the reputation of those persons, particularly if they're never charged. So these are the rules, and I think rather than calling for a change in the law, they should be calling for, as I am, that the rules that already exist to be enforced. Because what you don't want to do is have a rule change which has a blanket ban on naming of suspects, even when it's in the interests of justice that those suspects should be named. So, for example, if somebody's been a teacher in a school and there's an allegation they've assaulted a pupil, and the pupil then says, actually, many other pupils were assaulted by this man, you want to be able to publish the name in order that those who've also been victimised know that it's important at that moment for them to come forward.
So if you're saying that the rules around anonymity are already there and enshrined in law, why aren't they being enforced by the police?
Well, they're part of the police's professional guidance. You shouldn't actually need the law to change the rules relating to the police, because they're there. What should happen is senior officers in the police should make sure that their officers abide by the rules. And if they don't abide by the rules, and if they give out names informally or formally to their friends who are journalists, then that is a disciplinary offence and they should be disciplined. But what we don't want is to have a law change which might make it more difficult to prosecute serial sex offenders, when what really needs to happen is that the chief officers of police should get a grip on ensuring that their police officers abide by the guidance which is there to protect people in respect of whom it might never get it to an arrest, it might never get to a charge, and yet the reputational damage is there. So that's why these guidance and these rules are there. They should be enforced, but don't do a rule change which might make it more difficult to capture serious sexual offenders.
Paul Gambaccini, who, as you know, is one of the men who's been affected by this, says that the current law does need to be changed. And I'm going to quote him here, because he says currently it encourages everyone from liars and lunatics to make some false accusations. Do you have any sympathy with his point of view?
Well, I can see that false accusations are very damaging, and which is why the name of somebody who is against whom an allegation is made or who's suspected is not to be given out before they're charged. That's what the rules say. And a chief officer of police has to approve that. So I think really Paul Gambaccini and Cliff Richard should be arguing for the rules to be enforced as they are now. And their complaint should be not that the legislation's wrong, but that chief officers of police are not stopping police officers giving out information which can be premature and very damaging to reputations. That's why the rules are as they are, but they're just not being enforced.
Harriet Harman, thanks so much, and good to hear your thoughts. I'd like to turn to Joe Morris now, a barrister, as I say, at Charter Chambers, who specialises in cases of sexual assault. Thanks for joining us. I would like you to pick up on Harriet Harman's comments there, that the current legislation is not wrong, it's just the current rules need to be enforced more properly. Is that your view?
No, it is not. I wouldn't blame the police for making that decision. It seems to me it's a matter for the government, not the conscience of individual police officers.
So you would support a change to the law that sexual offence suspects should be granted anonymity until they're charged?
I would. It seems to me there are two principal arguments for naming suspects. The first is to encourage other witnesses to come forward, and that is incorrect, because that can be done by printing a description of the offence rather than naming the suspect. And in fact, that is what was done in the case of the black cab taxi driver. That is what is always done with unidentifiable attackers. And the second is that in some way it renders the allegation less worthy of belief. And what I would say about that is that it is not a comment upon the specific allegation. It is about the nature of the allegation, the fact that it is uniquely destructive to reputations, because rape is an allegation from which men can't really recover, even if they are never charged or tried and acquitted.
Is that therefore your argument as to why there should be anonymity for rape but not for other serious offences?
Yes, it is an entirely different type of allegation from serious violence or fraud or the like. That they aren't quite the same social opprobrium that attaches to sexual offences.
What about the argument that by publicly naming suspects after they're arrested, it does encourage more people to come forward? I know you said you didn't have much truck for that argument, but I'd be interested in you expanding your thoughts a little bit more about that.
That can be done very easily by printing a description of the modus operandi of the offence. For instance, Jimmy Savile could have been identified by allowing the press to say something like a well-known children's presenter within the BBC is said to have committed these offences. And what I would say about that is that would actually strengthen the hand of the Crown, because how can one ever rule out collusion between complainants if complainant B can read about the allegations of complainant A in the press or on social media? How much stronger would these allegations be if two separate people who didn't know each other had come forward and named the same person?
Clearly, we've spoken to Harriet Harman. She takes a different view. I'd be interested to see how you think this might all end. Do you think there might be a change in the law?
Me or Harriet?
You.
I think it's coming. I think anonymity is coming. It's been coming for some time.
Joe Morris, really good to talk to you. Thank you for your thoughts. And before that, Harriet Harman.